Welcome to Season 3 of Conscious Conversation, where we aim to inspire deep and meaningful interactions that grow into a community of practice that is committed to healing, resilience, and expansion. Greetings to everybody listening or watching. Welcome to Conscious Conversations with Mabato Monte. In this episode, I'm having a conversation with Clara. And I'm going to ask you, Clara, to say your name properly because I just love how it sounds. And we'll be talking about navigating identity through spirituality. I think many of us Black women go through a lot of experiences, a lot of unraveling, because we sort of like get into, I don't want to say grow into our womanhood, because a lot of the time we are not growing into it. It just seems to be something we step into because of our socialization, whether it is around our identity as women, our identity as sexual beings, our identity as wives, our identities as mothers, and just people in the world. There are many, I think, experiences that have often reduced the fullness of who we are as human beings, and the experience we could be having. And we can draw on some of the experiences of Black women in general throughout history, what they have fought for, whether it is coming out around their sexuality, not wanting to subscribe to being a particular type of woman, around being domesticated, and all these things, whether it's in corporate, in society, we get challenged so much. And I think we can all agree that the challenges Black women in particular face are very different to the challenges Black men face or white women face. And so we have a very unique relationship with capitalism, with colonization, and with society in general. And so today I'm having a conversation with a dear friend and a sister, Clara, and I'm hoping we can share with you her views around navigating identity through spirituality, because Clara has also gone through certain experiences in recent times that have allowed her to tap into the other parts of her that she may not necessarily have had a relationship with before this point. And so, my friend, welcome to Conscious Conversations.
Thank you so much, dear sister Mabatu, for having me here. I am really happy to be here. I'm feeling very honored and privileged that you invited me. And I am also happy to say that you are one of these amazing Black women that have inspired me. So I really appreciate it. I like how you lead your life. And I'm very happy for you also in this podcast that you're doing and just raising awareness about these very important topics. And I always say you are queen. That's all I have to say.
Thank you so much. Please say your name and share with us your background for our community so we know who we're talking to.
Yes. So I was just, I was just here, joking with Mabatu because my name, I always tell people my name is Clara Alcantara. That's the English way of saying my name. And it seems simpler to people that mostly speak English. But the real way of saying my name, I was born in the Dominican Republic, and so I speak Spanish. So the real way of saying my name is actually Clara Alcantara. So Clara Alcantara. That's you wanna if you're up for the challenge and you wanna say the real way, that would be the way.
Who is Clara, and how do you relate to the world or with the world?
Yes. So wow, what a question, right? Who is Clara? Oh my goodness, mercy. That can, I think about a lot of things with that question, as to who I am now, because I have gone through so many changes. But I'll just tell you generally about me overall. So I was born in the Dominican Republic. That's a country in the Caribbean. It's right next to Haiti because they share an island, Haiti and the Dominican Republic. And I was, even though I was born there, I was about 7 years old when I came to live in the United States with my mother and my siblings.
Mhm.
Um, and so I grew up in Boston, Massachusetts. So that's basically a lot of my culture is from Boston. And then the other half of that is from the Dominican Republic, since I was, raised by my Dominican family. Um, and I just had a pretty, I grew up religious in a very specific religion that was pretty, there was a lot going on there. There was a lot. I actually always said and thought that I would never leave this religion and I was never going to betray Jesus. I can talk more about that later. And I was like, I went to university, college. I was actually the first person in my family to graduate from college and university. I have a master's in communications, and I currently work as a communication specialist at a health system. Uh, and and just and oh, I also have two beautiful children. Denise is the oldest, and Clarissa. They are 9 years old and 6 years old. My one of my greatest teachers, and to date is that I know that I'm going through a huge transformation that started several years ago. And so many things have changed for me. So I would say that this is what the summary of myself, in the world is right now.
So, with the move from the Dominican Republic to the USA, I know you were still very young. I think you're around 7, you said. Do you ever feel like you're not American?
Mm. Wow, that's a really good question. So this one, oh wow, and I think many people that are immigrants to this country, I know that they have their own stories about this, and it maybe can relate to me. So when I came from the Dominican Republic, at such a young age, I was about 7 years old. But my mom at home, I always spoke Spanish at home with my mother. I was never really speaking English, so it took. It felt like it was a bit difficult growing up, I would say, in the United States, because it felt very much like, I'm growing up in two cultures. When I leave the house, I feel like I'm in the United States. When I'm home with my mom, I'm in the Dominican Republic because she's raising me like this, like a Hispanic, woman. And there were some difficult things. I actually did get bullied quite a bit, especially in middle school, because I had an accent. So my English, is not sounding or wasn't sounding like the English of the students at school. So they would make fun of me a lot. And they seem to have an issue with it. Even the teachers sometimes, um, it's one thing that I think about with this question too is this whole being American, and like the pride. So no, I don't think that I ever fully felt from the United States because obviously, I have another culture. But at the same time, I have been here for a long time, and actually, I got naturalized as an American or U.S. citizen when I was already like 20 something, And the ceremony was interesting. It was actually very inspirational, and the way that they were talking in the ceremony, in my head, I was saying, I wish the United States was like this, as they're presenting it to you in this naturalization ceremony, because I think that what they want to do and what they think about, in my opinion, is really different than the reality. I think of the things that go on in this country. And one last thing that I'll mention: many times I feel uncomfortable when we've had to sing like the national anthem of the United States, like in sports and other areas. I remember I'm always like, and I'm still sort of like that, one of those people, should I put my hand on the chest? Should I go like this? Like, cause then and these days I don't really do it just because I know just way too much. And I don't know. I think even if I was in the Dominican Republic, there's something about being so like, I don't know. I don't know if the word is like a nationalist. I don't know if that's like the official word, but so into a country where you're just so into it. I seem to having issue with that, you know? So anyway, I'll leave it there.
That is such an interesting thing you're bringing up, because whilst having pride around one's country and things like that, here in South Africa, how I've seen it is around how it can often breed xenophobia. Here in South Africa is almost seen like a hub where there are better opportunities than specific countries around Africa, particularly around the SADC region. And we have many of our African brothers from other countries coming to South Africa. And because of the economics of things and the scarcity mentality or setup or structures that capitalism creates, because we shouldn't have lack, we shouldn't have people going without food, right? It's a system that has been designed in a particular way to ensure people don't have enough or don't think they have enough. And I see how, because of this identity around a particular country, people can be very mean to others, you know. And I think where you are at from a spiritual perspective also has a lot to do with what is happening just in terms of the shift in the consciousness of the world, where we are getting to realize that we are all one. You know, it doesn't matter which part of the world you're in. We are all basically going through the same stuff. We are feeling the same emotions. It is often just presented in different ways. And because of classism, some people who are like middle class sort of like want to portray this idea that their lives are better. But a lot of the time, they're suffering with debt. They're suffering with addictions and all sorts of things. It's just that they cannot mask it better than people who have got less money, you know? So it's it's interesting that you have this sense that you belong to the world and not necessarily one nation. I love that.
Yes, thank you. I was really thinking this, even this week. We're really all related. Like we really just come from the same place. Sometimes we think that we say, "Oh, brother or sister," but we really are for real,
Mm.
brother and sister. Yes.
And would you say, you're qualified, you're an educated woman, you are the first one to go to university in your family. Let me first ask here, was your dad a part of your upbringing?
My dad?
Yeah.
My father? No, he was not. No.
Do you think that affected you and your mom and how she reared her family in a particular way?
That is a really good question again. Growing up, I really felt like it was I was like, oh, this is affecting me. And I would tell a lot of people I didn't grow up with my dad. So one of the reasons really was distance too. But even beyond distance, he was living in the Dominican Republic the whole time. And my mom wasn't really having me keep in touch with him too much. Later on, I understood, by the way, some things that I felt like I'm actually glad that he wasn't really in my life, or that I grew up with him, because I just a lot of things after that. I will tell you what I think now about all of this, because I think growing up, you see kids at school and like, oh, mom and dad, and like, you start feeling bad, like, oh, I don't have dad, and all this stuff. And now I'm like, in many ways, I think it was better that I didn't grow up with him, because I think that the energy that he was bringing, that he was going to bring, was not going to be the best energy for myself and my family. And these days, because I'm actually a single mother, and the other day I got a book for the children, and I liked this book because this book was talking about different families. And I told the children, I just want to let you know that our family is complete, that we're fine, that there's love in this home, that if you need to talk about something, you can tell me, know, that families look different. And I told him, there are some families that the dad is there, or maybe they have the two parent, but many times, and I know families like this, many times they wish that there was one person that was in there because of all the trauma they're going through. So um the way that my mom raised me, she was very like a mom and dad. She would even tell us that a mom and dad, and like, taking on a lot of things. Um, but now as I look back, I think in many ways it was probably the better way of growing up.
Yeah, I resonate so much with what you've just shared because my father was also not a part of my life. And I mean, I remember this phase in my life where I really wanted to know my dad and I really wanted to have a relationship with him and stuff. And my mom, before she passed away, I think I was 16 and I was in grade 10, I was 15 or so. And I said to my mom, I want to go find my dad, and she said, well, here's the address. You can go find him, but you're going to get hurt. And girl, did I not get hurt. He promised to stay in touch. I was still, I think I was around 16, where he promised to stay in touch. And I said to him, I don't want money. I just want us to have a relationship. Like, can you write me letters or something? Maybe I was also romanticizing the whole experience as well. But that is what my heart yearned for, right? And so he didn't keep to any of his promises. Fast forward, I was now a grown adult, and again, I reached out. And because now I was going to see him, he lives in a different province, driving a car, and I was working, etc. There was an expectation around money. And I was like, man, this is not why I sought a relationship with you. But in getting to know him and his story a little bit deeper, I got to understand why he could not be a father to me. He had also not been fathered, So of course the man would not know what fatherhood looks like. And so a part of him and part of me, well, all of me actually, was able to forgive him for having that expectation that he would be around, because I understood that he had no point of reference. But I also saw the children that whose lives he was a part of. And I was very glad to say, I think my mom did a pretty damn good job. So I totally understand where you are coming from with that. And I think a lot of the time we tend to be so critical about our upbringing, not realizing that sometimes these things have protected us from certain things. We just never know.
You just never know. And then I think that society, again, I always say society is so strange, as we know. Like, they have so many things that I just think that they love to put in a box, but they don't go deeper than that. They don't talk about this stuff. They just want. It's almost like they want to be appeased. They just want in their minds to know that something is in a box and we're good. And for them, it's, oh my God, that person. Look, there's mom, dad, and the kids, yay, kind of thing. And then if there's a divorce or something happens, that's horrible. And all of a sudden it's like, now you're like, I don't know, like, it's almost like, I don't know what that is. It's almost like they put you in, like, again, another box and like pour you and whatever. Let me tell you something. I have a friend of mine, okay, that grew up with dad and mom. And many times, and she's already, she's an adult, she's like around our age. Many times, I remember back in the day, because, I've known her for a while, this woman was crying on the phone with me, just telling me that she wishes her mom would leave the dad. Because he was toxic in that house. He caused more damage. She really believes that if he wasn't there, she would be a bit more healthy. Even just remembering stories like that. And just really quick, I'll tell you quickly. So, like I said, I didn't, because there's some similarities that are interesting. I didn't grow up with my dad. My mom, she kind of didn't, she wasn't very strong at, here, call your dad in the Dominican Republic. The distance is hard. There's a sea between us. There's all this stuff going on. Even when I was in the Dominican Republic, as a baby and child. He barely came around, and when he did, he would just bring candy and leave, kind of thing. So even his own interest while I was there was pretty low. And then when I was around 18 years old, I don't know, someone gave him our phone number, or I don't know if it was my mom, somebody did. I was 18, and one day the phone rang, and this is when it was mostly home phones, okay? Cell phone wasn't a big thing. I picked up, and it was him. I felt very strange because in my mind, I made up my mind that in this house, it was just my mom, myself, and siblings. That's my family. Like I was a little different. I didn't feel a big yearning to connect with him at all. So I feel weird when he called, like, And it's so funny because he wasn't like, it's been so last when you were like, I don't know, 6 or 7, He immediately asked me for money. He was like, the situation is so bad here. Oh my goodness. And I felt like, are you kidding me? And I'm like, and I told him, I have no money. I'm just 18. I'm like, I'm only 18 years old. Like, I'm in high school. Like, can I send you, and then later when I was married to the father of my children, he's from the Dominican Republic, and he has this whole thing about you have to keep in touch with everyone from your family. If somebody tells him you have a family member in a cave over there, he'll go get them. That's how he is. So he felt offended that I was not in touch with my dad, and he kind of convinced me, like, maybe I should. Like, it wasn't even because of me, it was because he was like harping on it. So he goes to the Dominican Republic. I was pregnant with my first daughter and about to give birth, so I couldn't go with him. He goes to the Dominican Republic and he finds my dad. And well, they gave him the address, and he was driving over to his house to meet him, to connect him and me again. On his way to the house, my dad dies from like a heart attack. So the father of my kids, when he got there to a funeral. So he saw the funeral of my dad. So he called me to tell me that he died. So that connection didn't happen. And you know what was so interesting, Mabato? And I was pregnant, about to give birth. When he called from there to tell me the story and that he was on his way to meet him, because he even spoke to him on the phone, and he said, yes, come over, whatever. As he was going over, he dies. When they told me that, I was very surprised that I started to cry. Because I could have sworn I felt nothing. I could have sworn no, because I didn't grow up with him. There's nothing here. We never kept in touch. He called me once at 18. I kind of don't care. I just kind of said okay because the father of my kids was insisting. I cried. My mom was there. I cried. And I told my mom, I was like, I'm very surprised that I'm crying. But I said, maybe it's because he's my blood. And at the end of the day, there's something to this. There's something to this,
It's so powerful, and I resonate with it so much. Oh, girl, our stories are so similar because...
Yes.
When my dad was doing these things and like being all about money, at some point I said to him, listen, I actually don't want to have an unpleasant conversation with you. I don't want to tell you my truth because it might offend you. So for the sake of peace and me being good with the ancestors, because I don't want to sound like that, can we not have this conversation? Can we not speak again, right? And then he also died. At the funeral, I cried so much, but also like how it all happened, it just felt so spiritual. My womb was hurting. I was crying and it was like I was about to collapse. And I felt this thing in my womb, like there's something that was happening that was beyond the funeral, if that makes sense. And I didn't think I would cry for him. But it happened, and I'm still yet to really, really understand what that experience was about. So, yeah, I think some of these things we might not like where we come from or the circumstances around which we are born or raised. But I think everything has a reason for happening the way it happens. And there is obviously a higher reason and a higher purpose for us being born into the families we are born into the bloodlines we are born into. Yeah, but girl, you mentioned that you're divorced, you mentioned that you're a single mom. and that you were Christian, right? And maybe you still are, but maybe you've got a different relationship with Jesus. I don't know. What has that experience been like? And coming with the background and maybe the burden of being a Black woman in the ways in which we have experienced, because you know that I'm also divorced. It was not an easy decision to make, because there are a lot of things that come with that, from being having a failed marriage, being a divorcee, all these things, being a single mom. And a lot of these things are things one may have attempted to not reproduce because that is how we grew up. But if it's not working, it's not working. And I don't believe in staying for the kids, because a lot of the time the kids become wounded, or they are exposed to two people who do not love each other the way they're supposed to be loving each other. And it often is it comes up as hurt, you know, when people are hurting each other because you don't want to be with each other. How did you navigate that?
Yes, wow. Yes. I'm about to. I did grow up Christian. My mom, decided to raise us, and again, now that I look back, I understand why she did what she did. I also think that she was definitely looking a lot for community and some help. You know, being a single mother of four children, and yes, so I grew up in this religion, a Christian religion that pretty strict. My mom took more of the strict and conservative, if you will, side of that religion, because I guess there's different ways that you can practice it, but most of it is pretty strict, and there's a lot of beliefs even among the other Protestant religions that are a little bit different. There was a lot of prohibition, a lot of don't do this, don't do that. So this is basically how I grew up. I grew up with a lot of fear. And a lot of it was really religious based, and a lot of shame, and a lot of extremely deep devotion to Jesus. And I definitely do remember just feeling, and I would tell Jesus that I will never betray you. I'm not, even if I felt doubts and I felt weird things, I'll be like, no, I will never. That was my word. I will never, no matter what. I remember my siblings when they were teenagers, they left the church and everything, and that they had never gone back. And I was always seeing like the good one in my family because I didn't leave the church and I was still there. And even if things felt empty, if they felt like it didn't make sense, I was very blind following and like, no, even in my soul, I felt like this is boring, like this doesn't make sense. And like, I would like shove it. And I'll sometimes like cry and I'll be like, Jesus, restore my doubt. I would preach a lot in church. Like I was very into this, But it was, I don't even know if I want to call it into it, more like holding on to dear life, because I just felt like there's no way I'm going to betray Jesus. I mean, they just put it in my head so much. I mean, even when they would talk about Jesus dying on the cross, I was a child that would be crying about that for hours about it, And then, the university I went to was also tied to religion. It was a religious-based university. There were some things about it that were pretty good, that were helpful to me. But again, I was always in that, I call it a box. I was always in that box, all the time, and I had some relationships, with some men that didn't really work out. There were a lot of things that I was already noticing. I would always ping things to, I grew up with a single mother, I grew up without a father, and this is why I'm like this, and this is happening. I felt very depressed growing up. There was a lot of thinking about suicide. There was a lot of that going on. And again, I'm trying to summarize the story because it would be too long. What ended up happening is that later on, I had already, I was done with my schooling and everything. I was a single woman. I actually decided to travel to Brazil and by myself. And again, it was tied. I was teaching English there, but it was tied to this church. And, there were some interesting things that happened in me, some little changes in me. But I didn't really venture out or do even more that I could have done, I would say, in Brazil because of this box and this religion, And then after I came back to the United States after that trip, I said, because of reading things, I would always read these books and these things. If you grow up, and as a Black woman, right, there were always the statistics that I grew up with reading. Always, especially when I was already in college reading about it. these statistics. Oh, black woman, blah blah blah. Or most black women end up being single moms. Or if you grew up without a dad, these are the dysfunctional things or whatever, that you're gonna exhibit. If you grow up with this, you're gonna end up with an abusive guy, and that's gonna hit you and cheat on you and all this stuff. So in my head, I said, no, I'm going to prove this statistic wrong. This is not gonna happen to me. No. So sometimes I would be very attracted to some men, and I wouldn't really go for them. And because I needed to find the safest, the guy that was not gonna hit me, and the guy that was not gonna cheat on me, is what I said. So somebody randomly just hooked me up with a guy from church who's a pastor. I did not feel any attraction whatsoever to this guy. You know how you know your own wisdom and you know your intuition? I felt zero attraction. And he didn't really feel it as much with me, but he said that he prayed for 90 days and fasted, and that God told him that it was me. And then I said the same thing, one of those things. And it was not the natural me. It was just me going against something. Because in my head, I said, no, I'm going to prove this statistic wrong. I'm going to have a solid family. And it's not all about emotion. And I said all this stuff to myself, and I did.
So,
It was a the marriage was so fake. I kissed this guy, and I felt like I wanted to run, but I was already there. It's like I forced myself, in the community around me that was egging me on that. It felt like an arranged marriage. That's the best way that I can say it. But like like this forced thing. And there was never a connection there. So what I started to do in this marriage is I will make the connection grow, and the connection that is not there is going to be born out of nothing, because we're going to be that family. And this is who I'm going to be, and I'm not going to be like my mom. I'm not going to be a single mother like my mom. There's no way that's going to happen. So I did a lot of this. I remember just like trying to do all of this restorative stuff in our marriage that was dead from the beginning, by the way. But like all this, let's read this marriage book. Let's read this. And I was the only one doing that, by the way. He was not really doing that. And let's do that. And he was extremely, I don't know how to say it. There was just no connection. He was just, his mind wasn't there. He always kind of wanted to be with other people, really, not really me, but because he's a pastor, he's not really gonna like cheat, if you will, like that.
yeah.
And although some of them do, but he was the type that I guess he didn't want to. I got more depressed in this marriage. It was very miserable. I felt empty all the time. I wanted to run away from my family all the time. Until one day, it was about already 7 years into this marriage. Something happened. I cannot really put a finger to this, Mabatu, where I decided that I was going to write my whole life story. So I went on a trip. I asked him if he could stay with the kids. I went on a trip by myself. It was a 10-hour train ride. And during that train ride, I wrote since when I was born until that time. And around that time, I don't know what it was. We were living in New York City at that time. There was a curiosity, something that was born. And I just started writing about my whole life. I started to just feel like, this is dead. There's something dead here, and I have to. It's just an inner knowing. I don't know. I have to. I tried, by the way. Yeah, we went to counseling. I tried doing counseling with me. I thought there was something wrong with me. I tried doing counseling, including him. Nothing. Even the counselor himself, when he got me by myself, kind of hinted and suggested that it's almost like he was saying, I don't think that this is it. Like, I don't see a way through this, because it was just totally different people, no values together. I was already changing in my mind, but I think that change was like me being who I really meant to be. Finally, maybe starting to be brave, something that I never did, because everything was about people pleasing. That's all I did. Pleasing him. I didn't even know what my favorite color was or what I wanted in a living room. It was all about this guy and all this stuff, And not to make the story, because I feel like it's pretty long. So I'm trying to. What ended up happening around that time is that I left the religion. I was led to that. This was happening naturally. The marriage was already pretty bad. It was just not good. Again, I cannot getting into details right now will be a little bit too much. That thing that you said about some people were telling me, oh, then wait until they're in college. Just stay with him and wait until they're in college. And I was like, there's no way. And also the fact that they blame women about everything. Because I'm like, what if because we were already deciding, we were barely talking to each other. This felt like he was a roommate at this point, and even from the beginning, it
Oh,
felt like, to be honest, from the beginning, it felt like that. And I was trying to hold on to this idea of just staying there, like, no. And people were starting to tell me that when this thing broke apart and went south. Oh, but he didn't hit you. Oh, he didn't cheat on you. And I was like, wow, the bar is so low. This is how low that the bar is. This is,
I
they
know.
like, and a lot of people, I lost a lot of my most of this church community that I had. I lost. None of them talk to me anymore. And in a way, I'm not really missing that much, to be honest. And it was a lot. It took a lot of courage. I feel happy right now when people tell me that I'm courageous, because it makes me want to cry sometimes, because I'm like, that I didn't see that was courageous, but now I see it. That was courageous. I had to write a letter to the, I don't know, they call it a conference of his bosses, because they look down on divorce in this church. Really, usually the pastors that get a divorce, they get fired from work. And I told him that I'm leaving the religion and that I no longer want to be married to this person because my path is different, blah, 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 blah. And that is how he was able to keep his job. Because
Sure.
I was like, he's still the father of my kids. I don't hate this guy. I just know that this was not it. But I forced this because I needed to prove, that was one of the reasons. I had to prove everyone wrong. I'm not going to be, and look at me. And they're having feelings of failure, all those statistics. And I'm like, girl, society is wrong.
It is so
And,
wrong.
and I've told you this before. I said most people probably need to be alone. They probably need to be alone analyzing themselves.
Exactly. And I think because of our history and our background, we make those kind of decisions where we like, I'm not going to be one of the statistics. I'm not going to be a single parent. I'm not. And I've seen so many women stay against their own knowing, right? But it is because a lot of the time women also don't have the courage to go in pursuit of their dreams, like to believe that they actually deserve more and they deserve a love that is wholesome, that is nurturing. And, that involves two parties who both want to be there, right? But I think that often happens because we have not connected with our true selves. And so even the ideas we have around who we are and what we need and what we want out of relationships is often so misguided because of the trauma work we have not done, because of the wounding or the wounds we have suffered and have not worked through. Because again, you get to a particular age, the expectation is that you will get married, you will have kids. And if you are not any of that by 40 or even 37, there's something wrong with you. And so I feel like there's this pressure around women and around Black women in particular of being successful, even what that success is framed as, is very, against us, I think.
Yes, and it was like the textbook thing that you're talking about that happens to most of us, Black women.
Mm.
Um, because I remember when I came back from Brazil and I was back, in Boston, with my family. Most of my mom's friends and like the people that I grew up with and that I knew kept telling my mom, "Wow, so your daughter did all this traveling and she did all this stuff and she still," because I was like 30. And that really hurt me. And I'm
Mm.
like, and I remember praying and like, I guess praying to God and being like, please God, by 35, by 30, and I was like, by 35, I hope I meet the guy by 35. And then when I met the guy, it was like I forced it. Like I just forced all this, and then I said it was God. And I was like, never, after that whole thing happened, I was like, I will never say, I said later, I'm never gonna say about any guy that this was God's will, because I remember saying that a lot to convince myself that it was. Instead of saying this was my choice, I actually made this choice. And I know people like to do a lot of, oh, if I went back and did it differently. Sometimes I don't like doing that because I'm like, well, maybe I would have still done this. I don't know. And I think that maybe I just maybe thinking more forward. I don't know. I think that the probably the best thing that could have happened is no, because I remember crying at 30 that I was single. I remember washing dishes and sweeping and crying like someone was killing me that I was single because all my friends were getting married and I wasn't and all this stuff. So I must be a failure, you know. And I think that I would say to anyone who's 30 right now or 35, I don't know, take you're good. Like trust me, it's gonna be fine. Okay. And actually the best thing you're doing, thank you, Mabatu, is definitely get to know yourself. Something that I didn't do. I kept pushing that actually. Because whenever there were situations where I could get to know myself, I would push and I would put Jesus in front of me. No, it's about Jesus. And whatever the church or the Bible was trying to teach me about Jesus, because I felt like if it veered away from that, it wasn't valid. So I felt like I was set up for failure because of a lot of this thinking. And you did mention Jesus in there. And oh my goodness, there's so much we can say here. But I'll just say this because of I'm doing through a lot of transformation and just seeing things very differently. I know I don't really call myself a Christian per se. I still do believe in Jesus. And I do quote the Bible because it's the way I grew up, but I quote it in such a different way, you know, than the way that I would grow up. I feel like I made peace. Recently, I wrote a journal to Jesus. I was crying because I was so tired. I remember I would say that Jesus was my dad growing up. He's my dad, you know, because of not having a dad. And it was a very cathartic moment. I was crying writing this journal to Jesus. And I said, Jesus, I don't hate you. And I was like, I know you're proud of me because you're finally seeing that I understand that this is not just about one person, that this is about all of us, about the universe, that the qualities you have, I have, you know, that is thank you, ancestors. Thank you, tree. Thank you, river. Thank you, bird. Like, thank you, Clara. Thank you, me. You know, I stepped up. I am divine too, just like you, you know, I was writing all this in my journal, just like you, Jesus. And these days, I thank everyone. I say, thank you, you know, bird, thank you, mountain, you know, thank you, ancestors. And I was like, and Jesus. And I'm like, and I was like, Jesus. Sometimes I've said, Jesus, no offense, but I'm going to thank you too. And also all these other beings right here, because we are together. And it was sort of a beautiful moment of this is the way that I make peace with Jesus. To just see him as another being that is helpful to my journey. And I feel like Jesus is clapping for me because I'm finally am seeing that there was more to this. That there was much more to this. And I'm leaning into this every day. So yes.
And how have you found the transition between being or from being religious, Christian, and having a relationship with your ancestors, and perhaps taking it a step further, looking at the experiences of the women in your bloodline? You know, there's a lot we carry, you know, as women because our grandparents, our grandmothers, our mothers have gone through sexual trauma. They've gone through so much oppression just from an identity perspective. Just even also as sexual beings, having the freedom to say, I love sex and I want to explore sex, you know, and I want to do all these things, right? Where women are trained to be these good girls who behave well and so on. And so I feel like there's always so much extra work we need to do because we give birth, right? And so in our wombs, we carry the wounds and, you know, the traumas and the pain of our mothers as people who are able to give birth. And so I think there's more responsibility we carry because we also, in a way, groom society, you know, even the men. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you for these questions. So I'm going to kind of, you know, divide it into a little bit. So just touching a little bit on the ancestral line. I'm going to tell you something. I think even me saying ancestors, I'm trying to get used to that because this is not easy for me. You know, kind of growing up one way of seeing things in this religious way. Even saying ancestors, it feels difficult. I'm getting more and more comfortable with that every day, you know, because it's a journey. Many times in this journey, I have felt like somebody threw a cold bucket of water at me or punched me in the stomach. I know it sounds kind of like But that's one of the ways that I describe it, like this. I have cried a lot because I think the damage has been done.
Mm.
The way that I grew up and even about my ancestors and everything that has been passed down, the damage has been done. So sometimes I cry about that. Um, Sometimes I want to say poor them, but sometimes I say poor me as well. And I cry about myself and the way that I grew up and the things that I was taught that were wrong, that I thought absolutely with all my heart were actually correct, but they were not correct, you know? And it has felt like a bucket of water to know that there was more and that I was not correct. I don't know. It's hard to explain, but this is the best way I can explain it. The other day, so my mom still goes to church and she's still in the same religion and same church that she raised me in. Lots of limited beliefs, lots of archaic, lots of everything. In fact, there's a lot of patriarchy and a lot of my misogynistic thinking in the men of this church. So I grew up that way. Besides growing up in a culture, which is the Dominican Republic, a lot of the Hispanic, unfortunately, right? Not all of them, but a lot of them, Hispanic mindset or the Hispanic people, there's a lot of patriarchy going on, and a lot of women are in whatever this and that. And the church that I grew up in had a lot of it too. So I did grow up being conditioned to be a certain kind of woman, you know. But just touching a little bit on the spiritual part of this and religious part, I remember the other day my mom came back from her church and she was talking to me, and she's a deaconess and at her church, and she said that she was in charge of communion that day, making sure communion went well. And she said that the pastor was insisting that they dress in white. And my mom was like, "Oh, I don't like it when deaconess dress in white because that's witchcraft. That is a witchcraft thing, and that pastor is wrong. Because that's like, yeah." So she said, that's like a witchcraft, that's pagan, because the witches, dress in white and blah blah blah. And she has said this before, even as I grew up. But for the first time, because of me just knowing other things now, that pained me so much to me. And just recently, like a week before, I was reading, for example, a lot about voodoo and Yoruba traditions and all that. And I took a DNA test, and I saw a lot of my African roots shown up there. And I started reading again about the slaves and watching videos and everything that they went through and how they were taking their lands and they were practicing these animistic, right, traditions. And let's take voodoo, which is one of the most trampled upon and like the most misunderstood one, I think, maybe tradition that there is. So when my mom was saying, "Oh, the pastor wants the deaconess to dress in white and whatever," and this is which she's thinking about like this misunderstood voodoo thing. And it pained me because I was looking at my mom and I was like, wow, and little does she know that she comes from this, that our ancestors come from this, that our ancestors were dressing in white, and still are, for certain rituals, etc. And that this is beautiful and amazing. This is not something to be shoved and like to say it's of the devil or whatever she's saying, So it really pained me. And it's really hard to tell her that. By the way, I cannot really tell her that because she's not really going to be open to it and receiving it. And then once again, I started thinking about that ancestor line, how it comes from all of that. It comes from the colonization saying your tradition is trash and you shouldn't be doing this. And they probably were the ones, right, that started this. This is of the devil, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And to this day, if you go, Dominican Republic is just one country of many. But if you go to the Dominican Republic, most of the people are, I guess, Christian. And most of them will almost, if they could kill you, they probably will if they knew that you practiced one of these African traditions because they think it's the devil and they think it's horrible. There's like a small group in the Dominican Republic trying to preserve that. And I think that they're constantly getting attacked and they're constantly trying to take their tradition away because of this mindset, and it just pains me. It hurts me, and I know that these original traditions, women had more, you know what I mean? That we're seen differently, right? And there were goddesses and all this. And that's more interesting, And all of that has been taken away for us. So I think, to what you're saying, being a Black woman is hard, and I think going back to that and remembering that takes a lot of work now. And I say to myself these days, this is not a new path. This is actually the original path. And
Mm.
right, it's like you're just trying to go back to it. Like you're just trying to go back to the original path that for years and years and years, generations and generations was taken away from you.
Sure.
So I try to remind myself. Yeah, I try to remind myself of that. And the whole thing with the woman thing, and I know I'll just touch on that quickly. This is what I'm doing these days because being a woman these days is like an insult. It's almost like if you say that, it's like, and especially a Black woman, especially I always, in this society where I live in the United States, I think that we're like seen as the lowest of the lowest. Really, we really are, and you know,
Also
and
very interesting how we looked down upon by the white system, but a lot of the time Black men also treat us in very disrespectful ways.
unfortunately, and that's because of that damage, right? And again, I think about it all the time. It comes from all of that. I don't know. I don't know if this is a miracle. Is it a miracle to wake up one day and to say, wow, this is wrong? Or like, this is how it really originally was. There was more respect, even from the Black man to the Black woman. There was more of this, and now it's not that. This is not a thought of mine. This is a thought from all of the messed up shit that happened back in the day that was passed down, and we're still holding on to this shit. Like we're still like just holding on to this, and we're not thinking, and we're not trying to, I don't know, to see that this is not the way.
Serving us. It's not helping us to become wholesome, to become regenerative, and we see it in our communities that more and more people are feeling isolated. So obviously, this way is not working. But like you say, people just want to hold on to it. But I also think it is because it gives people their identity. So many identities have been framed around these ways of being and of believing, that people are almost afraid of what life could be like if it was not this way. And it is so limiting. But I also just want to acknowledge what you said, that this is not a new path. It's the original path. I love that. And I think it is so powerful because our ancestors knew these ways of relating with the ecosystem, of being with nature, of being with each other. Support was not something you had to cry out for. It was a given. You and I, we tend to speak about being single moms and not having a community of like-minded people, or not even like-minded, or people we share the same values with, people who are open-minded, but respectful and honorable, right? People with deep care for others. And it makes parenting challenging, particularly as a single woman, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. It definitely does. And yes, you and I do. I call it, we vent a little bit. I always tell people this, and I said that back in that time when that happened. Because trust me, when I knew the day I got married, like I could have literally walked out of that altar. I
Mm.
probably should have. But let's say a year in, I already like it got worse. And I was like, no. And there's some people actually that tell me, wow, if I were you, I would have left that the first year. I would have, but because of me holding on and trying to be super optimistic and what I told you. And, it took almost 8 years to really let go, and also thinking a lot about the children. So it wasn't an easy decision, and thinking about, I'm going to be a single mom, which I really don't want to, right? And I remember when it all, when the divorce came through and all this stuff happened, I said to people, I'm not a hero. I don't want to be on a magazine that says, I'm a single mother and I work and I do this and I do that, because now I'm that very thing. A single mother that is doing 1,000+ things. I feel like I don't know that I necessarily have gotten a lot of mercy from people. I think that mostly judgment, I believe. I have felt that and seen it. Not really a lot of understanding. There's so many things that I do see in my everyday life that would be easier if I had more of a community. But then it's one of those things, right? It can't be just any community. And I tell people it's not even about a man. I'm not like, oh yeah, I need a man here to help me with the kids. I'm like, it could be 3 women. I don't care. I need help, physical help, right? I have cried so many times. Sometimes I feel my spirit is tired. I'm hearing this from crying. And I know there could be somebody out there, well, because I have had people tell me that, well, that's a decision you made and now you're in it, blah, blah, blah. This is what I am saying these days. Even if you were in a 2-parent home, raising children, even with 2 people, is hard. It's still a lot of work. I think that this makes sense when it's within a context of a group that makes sense. Because if you have a toxic group, forget it. Might as well. This is why we're doing it alone, because we're like, it's not, because sometimes people help, but then they don't help at all. You're like, never mind, So it can't be like that either. But ideally, right, it should be some groups, some of the grandmas helping, more help from the grandmothers, from mothers that you can trust your children with, right? That, and some people do have that, but I think it's very little people who have it. But yeah, many times I'm here just tired, wishing that I had a physical help here with the children. Sometimes I see some judgment, maybe, and I let it go, because I'm like, maybe I'm not doing everything correctly because I don't have help, but I am committed to at least giving them what the most important thing is. You know what I mean? To at least try to give them the most important thing is, but I always acknowledge that this is hard and I need help. Absolutely. And I wish, and sometimes people say weird things that are not helpful at all, instead of being like, hey, can I help you with something? It's like, they just don't really say it. And I'm taking a mental note, because I'm like, I'm complaining so much about this that I'm taking mental notes to myself to say, when my daughters grow up, I don't know what's going to happen to them and they have their children. I do want to be the supportive grandma. Okay. And not just to my daughters, for anybody.
Absolutely.
I'm trying to drive that in my heart, because I just want to remember this. I want to remember this. I want to remember how insane this was. I don't want to be that woman that gets older later, and I'm not even like, you know what I mean, helping. Yeah. Maybe not even my own daughters. It could be another woman. I don't know who's in a situation like this. I don't want to ignore these people. Anyway.
I love the fact that you are grieving, the crying, being able to recognize what we have lost, I think, because of colonization, right? The fact that your mom cannot be the kind of grandmother your children need, like at this point, that is all because of the whole migrant economic thing, where people had to move away from their countries of origin and go live in other countries where there is no support, because they had to earn money. And so the system has destroyed so much, of what we could have been. But I'm really proud that you are doing the healing work. You are grieving, and we did the course together, Bio's course, We Will Dance with Mountains together. And, he spoke a lot about grieving. And I think many people don't have this opportunity to grieve and to feel their losses, And I think up until then, we are not creating enough space between what we have experienced and the potential we have to change our circumstances and to co-create a different dream for us. Because I don't think this is all our lives can be or our communities can be. I think there's definitely opportunity for more. But we cannot see it if we are constantly on the overdrive of surviving, and paying our way through life. Because for most people, it means if you earn a particular amount of money, you can pay for help. But paid help is not the same as help from people who care genuinely for you. So yeah, that's just something I recognize there. So if you had one thing to share with women like you, or women who find themselves in the same situation you were in a couple of years ago when you were still married, what would you say to them? What have you learned about you as a spiritual being that is helping you to uncover and recover your best self?
Well, the first thing that I am going to say is love yourself. I'm gonna start there. I think that, and again, I'm not really. Sometimes I'm not sure where it all starts. I think that perhaps we just have it in us. As we were saying earlier, there's something original in us that I think we all have. Perhaps that's what it is. Something triggers it. But I'm gonna start with loving yourself. I remember hearing this a lot growing up, and I didn't get that. First of all, because of them shoving Jesus so much in my head, I thought it was just that Jesus loves you. That's all that mattered. Okay. Which is why also when I started this journey, I had to tell Jesus, you know what, Jesus, no offense, but I'm gonna have to put you to the side for a while. I am now reconciling in a different way, right? With this, but I had to put Jesus aside. I stopped praying to Jesus. I stopped being paranoid about everything, and it was always like, lean not, like this whole Bible verse about lean not on your own understanding. I'm like, I bet the colonials put that there because they really were like, that's what I'm going to put in the Bible about lean not on your own understanding. And the people in church quote this thing like, I'm like, that is so messed up. Like, that is straight up taking people's power away by quoting that so much. Or there's another one in the Bible about don't trust your heart because it's the most deceitful one. Are you kidding me? That is straight up
I haven't
taking.
gotten that far in the Bible.
Oh, there's a lot of verses, unfortunately, in the Bible, and there's a lot of verses in the Bible that are just not okay. That's a whole other topic, right? Just and I know that there was a lot of stuff that was added in there. There were books that were taken away, so it's not like you really have a whole Bible per se. I think that the colonization is deeply in there in so many ways. That's what I think. But but then the way I grew up, the Bible is the only thing. So you're like with that mindset, and just kind of taking this stuff away from you, this power. And I felt like when it hit me like a ton of bricks, I was like, I'm gonna have to put Jesus away for a while because my whole value was under Jesus, and it was all about, oh, Jesus loves you, and Jesus loves you, and that's it. What about Clara? What about I love myself? What about Clara loves herself? And I started very little. I started writing love letters to myself. When I started to really, and I started saying, dear Clara, look at you. You look so hot and so beautiful. I love you. It felt weird doing that, by the way, but I still wrote it, and look at you, what you did today. And like, I clapped for you. And it started doing something a little bit different in me. I think that's how I kind of started. Also, some of the Christian songs that I had to sing all the time that were part of me, that it was all about Jesus and stuff, I changed the words, and instead of Jesus, I put Clara in the song. So instead of like, Jesus, I love you, or whatever it was, I said, Clara, I love you. I would look at myself in the mirror and sing this. Sometimes I would start crying because I was so, never in my life did I take responsibility for my own self-love.
Sure.
And until my late 30s, right? And for my own self-love and my own confidence. And I was like, I have to take this away from Jesus, and I have to give it to myself. So I will tell women to love themselves, to embrace to know that you're also divine, that it's not just one person. It's not just your partner. Your value is not based just on your partner. Maybe this person is amazing, but you are amazing too. Just say that person is amazing, but also say me too. It's not just like one person that can do wonderful things. You can too. And I say, get to know yourself. We were just talking about knowing yourself. I don't know how that starts for you, but just get to know yourself. Like I told you, I did that's part of me getting to know myself. I did a DNA test recently that showed that I'm part of Western Bantu people, which is, and I'm like, this is why I love Mabatu so much. I know we're sisters for real. And there's like, and then I saw these other groups, and now I'm like, guess what I'm gonna do? So don't take advantage of curiosity. I know people say it a lot, and maybe it sounds cliche to say it, but please do it. Don't be afraid. I would say be curious about yourself. Get to know yourself. You live with yourself and you are with yourself. I remember back in those days when I started to transition out of a lot of this boxy, limited belief mindset. I remember that I would say, look, even if I lived under a bridge, and let's say that there was a puddle of water under this bridge, even if I lived under the bridge and everybody left me, everyone, and there was no one with me, I could look at my reflection on this puddle under this bridge and tell myself, I love you, Clara, and I'm proud of you, and hug myself. And that was so comforting to me to say that. And to say, don't leave yourself on the side of the road. Women, we're doing way too much. We're always doing a lot to the children, sometimes it's the partner, or this or that. And we always feel we gotta please all these people.
Mm.
And never ourselves.
Even recent, like even this is still happening because we've been conditioned this way, right? Sometimes I have felt so guilty because I said no to someone, and I'm like, are they gonna hate me? Oh no! And then I've had to learn to cry maybe and just to let it go and say it's okay. I always believe the right people that see your value will show up. But if you're just people pleasing and saying yes to everything and doing all this people pleasing, you have the wrong people in your life. They don't have the best
Well,
for you because they want you to be how they want you to be. And this is the first time in my life that I'm not trying to be perfect. And I these days, Mapato, I say if somebody doesn't like me, that's a blessing. Before I would be so afraid if somebody didn't like me because I had to be the good one. I'm like, no, I'm the good one. Everyone has to like me. No, not everybody has to like me, and that is okay.
mm,
Ah, I love it. I love it. And what you've just said now to say, eventually the right people will come along. And girl, you have been one of those right people for me because our values are so common. Like, yeah, it just feels amazing to have a sister and a friend like you. We can talk about a lot of things, and I trust that it is with the best intention and it is genuine. Like when we share things with each other, we don't always have to say, I'm going to listen to it right now, so that the people pleasing thing is falling away. And it's really, really nice to be in authentic ways of relating, right? Where there's this deep care, where I know I can pick up the phone and call you if I'm happy about something or if I'm sad about something. And I know that you will genuinely be there for me the same way I think you know that I would be there for you. And really just wanting each other to grow to the best of our potential, it is truly a blessing. And I think our community is coming together. Yeah.
I agree with you, my sister. It is a blessing. Like I said, I'm glad. I know we met in the this course, Bunja, and I will say this course was very instrumental in opening my eyes about a lot of things, especially a lot of things in the spirit world and ancestor world. And it was just wonderful. When we connected, and I felt this beautiful connection, and I know that we have with other people as well, and I see it as a blessing. And I love it. I think that this is how it should be. And I like the love, in my opinion, is based on freedom. And
mm,
I love that we can be friends and I don't have to be like, oh, Mabato is not acting exactly like me. It's okay. You don't have to act exactly like me, you
mm.
know? And I feel like we're all in our different journeys and steps of life.
Yet
I
we
it
can support each other in different ways,
may,
right? Yeah.
yes, we support each other in a different way. No one has to get angry. I just kind of see us like in many ways, I see part of my journey as a baby, because I'm kind of like learning, several things. So I'm one of those people that I'm not just gonna drop something because someone said do it. Like if someone said TV, an example, is bad for you, and today because someone said it, I'm gonna drop it.
Mm,
Guess what? 3 weeks later, I'm gonna be watching TV again because that was not a genuine change. So I think that we have to give space to people too,
yeah,
and when you're asking with advice as women, we don't own anybody.
yeah.
I think that walking a little bit more humble, we don't own anybody, but we can definitely support each other. You know what? For sure. And after that friendship and that love.
Thank you so much, Clara. It was amazing having this conversation with you. I'm sure we'll have lots more that will not be recorded.
Yes, we will. I think so. Thank you for inviting me. I feel so honored to have been here today.
It is my absolute pleasure.
We are the keys of Jaja, the chosen generation by Jah. We must go to conquer the